Welcome to PhD with Woman on It, Hack the Future. My name is clearly not Beata Young, but if you've been watching for the last couple of weeks, you'll know I'm Patrick L. Young, her husband. I am delighted to say, ladies and gentlemen, Beata is getting much better. She has been in hospital. She's not out of hospital. She is improving by the day. She's going to make a full recovery, and we're looking forward to her being back in this hot seat in January. If nothing else, because it means I can stop mansplaining to this wonderful community led by ladies. Today's positivity hack, PhD, will be delivered by our guest, Riki Turofsky. And the topic is a most engaging one for everybody out there who's living and breathing, a practical guide to overcoming loneliness at any age. Episode 165 of PhD starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my mojo, and empathy is critical to practically providing a guide to overcoming loneliness at any age. Now, let's start with a few mentions of things that have been going on in the Woman on It community. And we start with Natasha Melly Dowdy. Her Excellency, Natasha Melly Dowdy, heartfelt congratulations to Her Excellency. Natasha was the woman who brought the OSCE conference to Malta recently. She has been chairing the OSCE Permanent Council, and she's the permanent representative of Malta to the OSCE, normally based in Vienna. Every year they go to one of their member nations. For the first time in its history, the OSCE conference went to the Republic of Malta, that small but beautifully formed island in the middle of the Mediterranean, gathering the foreign ministers and senior officials from the OSCE's 57 participating states and 11 partners for cooperation during the course of December the 5th and 6th. Congratulations to you, Your Excellency. Over to Giovanna Galeno Malaga. She's a former PhD guest. Hooray, Giovanna, for being one of the speakers at the DevFest Catania, organised by CDG Catania. Congratulations on this achievement and for continuing to inspire and empower others. Good luck, and also congratulations to Shiraz Chabani for being one of the speakers for the upcoming DevFest Monastery 2024, organised by GDG Monastery on December the 14th. We're going to be very excited to hear what happens in your talk and learn more about your input into cloud computing. From the cloud, let's return to our topic for today, a practical guide to overcoming loneliness at any age. Our guest is the simply sensational Riki Turofsky, a woman of many multiple achievements in media. Originally, she was a professional singer. She continues to grace many's a stage over the course of the world to this day. Riki, where in the world are you today?
Well, right now, I'm in Florida, which sounds very exciting, and people think that it's beaches. But in fact, we're in a rural community in central Florida, and I think it's just starting to rain. We might hear some thunder. So we come to this wonderful little community every winter to escape winter in Toronto, which is where I'm born and where I've been brought up and where I've lived for a long time. So we're very fortunate that we come down here and spend 6 months in the United States in a wonderful little community.
How fabulous altogether. And certainly Florida during these months is absolutely marvelous. It's a joy to be there, isn't it? So tell me, Riki, give us a little bit of your own background, because I think the flavor of your life has been simply sensational.
Well, it hasn't been boring. I grew up in Toronto, and I had some very tragic things happen to me. I lost my father at an early age, and then my mother got very depressed, and she eventually killed herself. I moved in with foster parents who were absolutely wonderful and introduced me. I'd had music when I was a little girl. I sang, my mother played the piano, but that all faded away during her depressed years. And when I moved in with my foster parents, they insisted that I bring my piano with me from my mother's home that was being sold. And they were musical. And their son-in-law was a music teacher, so he encouraged me to sing. And of course, that helped me recover from those tragedies that are heavy duty when you're a teenage girl. And discovered that I had a voice. I was very musical and good pitch, and was introduced to lots of music. Now, skipping right ahead, I had a boyfriend at the time who was a young doctor, and he asked me to marry him. I mean, I was 19, but it sounded so exciting. And he certainly wasn't interested in my music. So we moved to the Yukon Territory, Whitehorse specifically. And I did a little bit of singing, with the Yukon Concert Association, different things like that. But it wasn't until we got divorced and I moved to Vancouver. Well, actually, before that, Canadian Opera Company had come on tour to Whitehorse in January of all times, which is a ridiculous time to go to the north. But at any rate, I heard them and I thought, boy, I bet I could do that. And when I went to Vancouver, there was an opera training program, and I auditioned for it. I learned a couple of arias from a record. We used records in those days, LPs, and I learned a couple of arias, went to an audition at this training program, and they said to me, "You've got a lot of nerve." And I took that as a compliment. But in fact, they said, but they heard something, so they told me to learn a couple of complete operatic roles, one in La Boheme and one Rigoletto, and then come back to see them. So, of course, I worked very, very hard, again, with recordings. And where I was living, I had a young child who was born in the Yukon, and she was just over a year and a half when we moved to Vancouver. And I was at the piano every day, working very hard, and went back and sang for them again. And they did take me into the ensemble, and they gave me a full scholarship. So that started out a whole different type of career for me, which was extraordinarily exciting. Now, time frame was 1967-68. And so that gives you an idea of how long ago that was. And then eventually I moved on from that training program to Toronto, went to the University of Toronto, got a degree. Sadly, my daughter died when she was a young teenager, and that was yet another tragedy that I had to deal with. But, I've written about this in a book, obviously, called Aria, Song of a Life. And it really talks about resilience. And if I was giving anybody any advice about anything, and again, back to loneliness, that resilience is really one of the keys to living well and to managing every day. Now, I think I can talk about loneliness in terms of older people. I have a lot of friends who are widows, and of course, they have had to deal with that. I don't know that I am really qualified to discuss the group that is largest in the world today of people who are suffering from loneliness, and that's the 14 to 29-year-old, which is incredible when you think about it. But in fact, maybe not so incredible, because nowadays kids spend so much time on social media. They spend time on their phones. And I think that has caused a really lonely condition. Although they might be communicating with other people, they're alone. When I was young, we didn't even have a television set, which tells you how long ago that was. I've just turned 80, and no television. And movies, yes. The subway was just built in Toronto. We had, I saw Elvis Presley, but that's another story. But when we were young, we were out and about. We weren't sitting in our rooms with our computers because we didn't have them. And I saw the development of the computers. In fact, when I got married, a birthday gift arrived, and I was very disappointed because it was very unromantic, but it was my first computer. It was an Apple, and it was one of those computers that was turquoise. And that was it became an exciting moment, but at the beginning it was rather disappointing. So basically what I'm saying is those young people that are suffering from loneliness, so much has to do, I believe, with the time that is spent by themselves on their phones. Now, even if they are communicating with other people.
So it's very interesting. I mean, you talk about that, the loneliness epidemic that we're seeing in the younger generation today. And you mentioned the spending their time on their phones and so on and what makes them lonely. Isn't it interesting how we've lost so many social skills so rapidly in the course of one generation? Because certainly I'm an only child, so I was born without a huge social set, but yet we would meet people so often, communicate with people so naturally. And I think, particularly in Canada, even in a big city like Toronto, there is a huge ethos of people communicating much more so than in, say, another big city name like New York or something, which is incredibly anonymous. It is curious how we've changed our social interactions so swiftly, thanks to this computer technology, which, let's face it, allows us to chat from Poland to Florida today.
That's correct. But when we were young people, at the age of a lot of these kids who are really discovering loneliness, we didn't have that. So we had to make our own fun. And I can remember going home after school and always with others, walking with them. We walked home. We often didn't even go home right away. We'd go to some cafe and have French fries and Coke or something like that and talk. Our friendships were really important. Our phone calls were really important. And we didn't have our own phone, so you had to use a family phone. It's just such a different life now. And although I think a lot of these kids feel attached, I don't know that they are. I often ask the parents of my grandchildren, do they have any friends? And are they online or are they real friends? I mean, are they friends in real life? And that is an interesting question, because so much online you can hide about who you are. When you meet that person, it's a whole different thing. I have a young friend who has had a girlfriend from a long distance, and it's an online relationship. And she's going to meet her this Christmas for the first time in person. Be interesting to see how that relationship grows or doesn't grow. On the other hand, being online with someone, you can learn a lot of intimate things when you have a lot of discussions with them. So, I mean, that's one thing, and that's our youth. And that's a problem with loneliness, isolation. Some of them even thoughts of suicide, depending on who they're communicating with. The older population, that's another story, because even if you're alone and you're not a widow, and I can remember when I moved back to Vancouver from Toronto after my daughter died, and I spent a lot of time filling up my calendar with things to do and with dates with people and lunches. And it didn't matter. I always told my girlfriends, go out with anyone. Doesn't matter. Man, woman, doesn't matter. Just go out, be out, do something, socialize. And as you know, in the United Kingdom, they have a minister of loneliness. I have read a little bit about that and what they do, but I think back to the days when I was singing in Amsterdam with the Amsterdam Opera and was out in the countryside. They had wonderful communities for their older population, people over 55 even. They lived in communities like little towns, even though they might have been an assisted living situation. They had people. They had to socialize. That is the most important thing that we hear about, and what makes people lonely is that they don't have any communication. So suggestions, I always remember my foster mother would say to me, there's always somebody worse off than you are. And at that point, you should do something for them, because you will feel better. And she was right. And even at a very young age, I got into volunteering. I think volunteering, when I talk to widows and friends, volunteer, go work at the local food bank, go to a school, go to a library. There's so many things you can do that aren't paid positions, but that you can bring your knowledge to. And by doing that, you're meeting other people. You work at a food bank, you meet a lot of other people. So
yeah, I mean, whether you interact with pets, with people, you play tennis socially, whatever it is. I mean, I think it is quite important in the loneliness epidemic. So therefore, I mean, if you're talking about what it takes to rise above life's challenges and rediscover joy and build meaningful connections, I mean, unfortunately, you have been through the ringer in a way. You've had many tragedies in your life, so therefore you know better than many of us the problems that can happen. What do you think are the essential several elements that you need to do in order to counteract loneliness?
Well, I think you should reach out. It's so much easier to just sort of sit and say, well, I'm lonely, my husband's gone, my kids are growing up. You have to reach out. You should try to connect with friends, old friends. They'd love to hear from you. And that's, of course, where you use the media, you send emails. I think you have to connect. And then, as I said, volunteering is important. Go to concerts. Take yourself, go by yourself. You can go by yourself to an opera, a concert. Just get out. Now, the sad thing about life today in a lot of American cities and Canadian ones too, is that where you live is isolated from coffee houses, restaurants, shopping, bookstores, because it's a driving community. People are driving more. Well, it depends on where you live. It's wonderful. Where I live in Toronto, you can walk from my house down to the main street, and there will be people there who they must be meeting every week for a coffee. And people sit in a Starbucks or wherever, and they start to talk to other people. People will come up, and if they see that you're a regular. So I think you have to reach out. You were talking about furry creatures, and I was saying to you earlier, I hope my dog doesn't bark while we're doing this. But before I had a dog, I had a cat. And the cat was a fabulous comfort to me, particularly after my daughter died. It was her cat, and there was no way I was giving this cat up. She lived to be over 21 years of age. But it was great to have another being in your place. And cats are easy. You put out a litter box, and you can go away for a few days, and friends will feed your cat. I graduated from a cat to a dog, and of course, I'm now on my third dog. I love animals. A dog makes you get up, you have to feed them, you have to walk them, you have to water them. So you can't be just involved in your own self and what you're not doing. So animals, of course, are fabulous. I think if you can join anything. Now, I'm a golfer. I became a golfer way too late in life. But one thing I love about the golf is the camaraderie of the other women. It's really fun. I mean, your golf can be up and down. It can be anything, particularly frustrating. But the people that you're with, we just did a potluck. And, potlucks are a great thing. Churches, if people go to a church, there are all kinds of support groups. I have a friend who's a widow, and she goes to a widow's lunch every month with a bunch of other ladies. I said, well, is that maudlin? She said, no, it's fine. We have a lot of fun. We laugh. We have a good time. So church or a synagogue, there are groups. There are things you can join. I'm not a quilter or a sewer, but there are women who are. And of course, they meet other people. And it's important to get exercise. Even if you just walk, even if you go and walk every single day with or without a dog, you're getting exercise.
Yes, and I think, you're right. I mean, exercise is great, communion, companionship, but also a lot of studies are showing these days that the ways to ward off issues like Alzheimer's and so on is actually through these sorts of social interactions, particularly those that involve exercise and creating something that keeps your grey matter going, even if it's just going to a class at the local technical college. I'm very interested also what you said about walking, because we used to live in Valletta in Malta, which was fantastic because it's a 500-year-old old city and you can't drive in it. You have to walk everywhere. Now, the hills are quite challenging, but it was a great place because it's all full of cafes and very interesting places, and you can meet lots of people as you go by, which I think certainly contributed to why there were a great deal of very happy older people around Valletta than you might find in other places. So, One thing that strikes me is, Riki, you have fantastic karma. I mean, you are a karma magnet. You're just exuding wonderment here, and you're so well kind. I think is the word I have to do say. And I mean, do you think that's a big issue also in terms of warding off loneliness?
I think I understood when you said kind. Is that what you said?
Yes, kind.
Kind is kind of my byword. I think one of the most important things we can be in life is kind. Kind to everyone. I mean, even when we want to criticize them, and even if we think about somebody who's alone. Again, my foster mother said, go and help someone. So maybe you're lonely, but maybe you knock on your neighbor's door, or you send an email and say, let's do lunch, or let's FaceTime. That's one of the things I do in the summertime with a couple of my friends here. I said, let's FaceTime. I'll FaceTime with you every Tuesday at 5 o'clock just to connect, even for
Mhm.
15 or 20 minutes. It's fabulous to connect. And people also, a lot of the women who are widows or widowers, will have grandchildren. And sometimes you have to reach out to them. Their lives are busy. Their lives are very busy. And perhaps, the lonely person has a lot more time on their hands. My husband's a glider pilot. And when he took that up, I took up golf because that takes a long time. And he's obviously older now and he's still flying. But one of the things he does, he goes to the glider port, even if it's a crummy day and he can't fly, because gliding is very dependent on the weather. They do what they call hangar talk. They just all sit around and chat and talk about the planes and all that sort of stuff. But this is great. This is getting you out because as a man or woman, whatever, you're in your house all the time, you're going to go a little batty. I mean, obviously, reading is important, but that can also, maybe you feel very lonely reading. So join a book club. There are book clubs everywhere, whether it's your local library and you find out what the book club is, or online, or start one. uh, I have a friend who started a book club here. So we're almost like her students in a class. It's not a true book club. She chooses the books and then she talks about them, and we add our own points. But I think that, and yes, kindness, being thoughtful, doing things for other people will make you feel good. A lot of people want to go visit their friends in the hospital, and sometimes that's just to feel good about themselves, going and caring and taking the time. So I think that is crucial. I think that's crucial in life to whatever age. I wish I knew what I could do to get the our younger generation away from this total isolation that they have, and they're with. Maybe it's not total isolation. Maybe they're communicating with others, but I still feel they're not out there. Now, maybe young kids who are in sports have a better opportunity because they are with others. It's very social. Team sports are great. Any team activities are great. I also swim. I swam this morning, and I try to swim at least 3 days a week. In Toronto, of course, it's indoors. Here it's outdoors. So again, it's weather dependent. But I find that's a time for me to kind of, meditate. I don't meditate, but maybe I do while I'm swimming lanes in a pool, and I just do it to feel better. I mean, skipping that all, as I told you, I'm 80, which is a scary thing because when you hear the number 80, you think of an elderly woman. I don't think of myself as elderly. I have young friends, I have old friends, and I try to keep active. On the other hand, my body has been around for 80 years. And so I can feel that. I mean, there's aches and pains. And when I play 18 holes of golf, I'm exhausted. I'm just dead. But the other thing is, I was just thinking about my sister who's a widow. So many of my friends, I take a nap every day, maybe just 15 minutes. But sometimes I have been told by people they don't like to nap too long because it makes them feel lonelier when they wake up. Now, I don't know about that, but it makes me just feel better when I wake up. But anyway, these are some of my thoughts about the loneliness condition. I do think what they do in the Netherlands is a good lesson for a lot of assisted living places, because you've got company. You know, you're
Yes, I
like,
mean, I think the injection of company is very important. Sorry to talk over you, but it is a vitally important aspect trying to make people happier. And I think you're also, the one thing I think is a big problem in modern life is driving. I mean, I'm very pro car. I love cars. I'm a car enthusiast. And I think car clubs are great, by the way. It's a great place to go and socialize. But the idea that you can't just walk out and meet people, the idea that you have to get in your car, go drive somewhere, etc., I think that's a huge challenge. Now, one of the other things, I mean, I'm very interested because we're here today, ladies and gentlemen, for PhD 165 with Riki Turofsky. She is, well, a woman for all seasons, a celebrated soprano, philanthropist, and author of Aria, Song of a Life. We're talking about Riki's extraordinary journey from foster care to the opera stage and her remarkable pivot to a life of philanthropy and advocacy. So in that transformational picture, I'm fascinated. Tell us a little bit about your philanthropy and advocacy, and indeed how that worked in relation to combating loneliness.
well, I think the philanthropy thing, I mean, this happened a lot when I was very young and living with my foster parents. And there was some project at school. I think they were little rubber tops that you could open cans with. And so I thought, okay, this is great. I'll go door to door and sell these and then give the money to charity. So that was the start. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed doing that. Of course, that grew. At one point in time, I adopted a child in Vietnam. That was part of a program. And so I got involved with that. And that was very interesting because she would write us and we would send things. And I did this with a boyfriend in high school. And he eventually saw her in Vietnam, which was amazing. And so it grew from that. It always just seemed like the most natural thing. I mean, even as a young woman, even when my mother was alive, she used to go and play piano at Baycrest, which was a home. We used to call it an old folks home. You don't use those words anymore. Being an old folk, I wouldn't want those words used, but I would go and sing. She'd play the piano and I'd sing something like Bless This House. And all these people would be so pleased. So I guess right from the beginning, I knew that to do something for someone who was less fortunate was important. As I got older and I got more money, I started to give back a lot more. I'm very involved with Food Banks Canada. I was on their board for a long time. So I saw the program. We traveled across Canada and you could see the different local food banks. And when you see people that have to line up and they don't have food to put on their table, it's an eye-opener. Even around COVID, there was a place I drove in Toronto. It was a very high-end neighborhood, and there were people who had normally had whatever you wanted. They had luxuries, but they were lined up for food banks. So that was kind of reality for me. My husband had throat cancer, knock on wood, which is right here. He is totally recovered. But we are very grateful to Princess Margaret Hospital, which is a major cancer research hospital in Canada and North America and the world. And so when we had money, we donated it there to start fellowships so that doctors could do, many more things. Because even though in Canada we have a healthcare system, the hospitals can't manage on that alone. They need donations. And so I got involved with that. And more recently, we've set up a program at Princess Margaret for skin cancer, which is often overlooked and leads to melanoma. So we have, and also to, and getting back to the technology thing, to get data for AI, because in fact, AI can be very powerful in medicine. And in the music world, of course, I received scholarships when I was singing, and from the Canadian Opera Company and Vancouver. And so that as I got older, I thought, well, I've got to give back. And before I had money, I would just either go on a board or on a committee of a board. and see what they needed, worked for fundraisers, all kinds of things, grassroots things. So it was just the most natural thing for me to be involved with philanthropy and to give back, because I am more fortunate. I'm very lucky. And every penny counts. We have a small concert association here in our very tiny little community called the Howie Mansion series. Is an old mansion that was renovated. And so, I give money there. The tiny organizations that I can give money to, I know that means more to them often than larger ones. And then my husband and I were sitting one day and we thought, well, our sons, I have 3 stepsons that I got when I met my husband, Charles, and they were little boys and they're now growing up. And we thought, well, okay, they've been given everything, or almost, but none of them actually is terribly spoiled that way. And so, but we thought we would set up a family foundation, to teach them how to give, and for them to choose the charities that interest them, whether they're transition in terms of the LGBTQ community or whether it's Indigenous community in northern British Columbia. They have different charities that interest them. And so this is an opportunity for them to give back, to learn how to give back. And I think it just goes on. We do golf tournaments that are charity, charity in this town. We have youth at risk. We have a school for children that have, when you see them, you just get heartsick. They have the most astounding disabilities, but they're happy and we can do things for them. We can do Christmas parties and things like that. So there are all kinds of places. And getting back to the loneliness factor, I mean, you're needed. You're needed. If you were willing and you have some time, even when you are working full time, giving back is crucial.
How wonderful, how completely inspiring. It's a joy chatting today with you, Riki. We're talking to Riki Turofsky, a practical guide to overcoming loneliness at any age. I'm Patrick Young, standing in for Beata Young. Thank you to all those who've sent us a little love, by the way, because it really helps get this show up on the algorithms. The AI does react to love, ladies and gentlemen, and it will help more people see and know about this fabulous show. More importantly, enough of mansplaining. It's my time to go into the shadows, and I'm delighted to say we're now going to have 2 incredible women carrying on the conversation for the rest of the show. Enter stage left, my co-presenter, the head of technology in our business, Jamil Navarosa. And just in case you're having a challenge, ladies and gentlemen, Riki is the slightly more blonde lady. Take it away, Jamil.
Thank you, Patrick. And I just wanted to say, hello, Riki. I just wanted to say a quote that is connected to our discussion today. The most terrible poverty is loneliness and the feeling of being unloved, said by Mother Teresa. While this quote holds true for everyone, it's particularly poignant for women. Remember, you are not alone. Finding your tribe, you can combat loneliness and thrive in your career. Hello, Riki. I hope you're enjoying our discussion today.
Hello, Jamil. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. What advice would you give to females to help their career or start an entrepreneurial journey?
On their career. Well, I'd say stick to itiveness. Don't give up. Sometimes you run into big challenges and it is so easy to just give up. I think that you really have to have resilience, because not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to like what you're doing. You just have to hang in there. I think you also have to have patience. I think you have to learn how to listen, because so many times when we're trying to get ahead in our careers, we talk, rather than listen and just hear what's being said. I think that is crucial. I also think it's good to have a plan B, where whatever you're doing, you may have a project that you believe so much in, but sometimes put a little aside and have a plan B, just in case things don't work out as you thought.
It's a great advice, and especially in tech, where innovation is key, it's also important to embrace challenges and learn from our failures. What are the top three soft skills all career-driven females, in your opinion, should have?
Well, I was thinking about that, but I've already really mentioned them. I think listening, good soft skill, patience, kindness, and I think those are really, really important to get ahead. I think patience.
Well, it's clear how these skills have played a role in your own remarkable journey. And these are the timeless skills that will benefit women in any industry. What is your strategy for problem solving?
Problem solving. Well, I don't know that I ever think of it as a strategy, but I have it all the time. I mean, every day there are problems to be solved because, as you know, I'm not in my career as such right now. I'm retired. I've been retired for quite a few years. But I think it is learning, dissecting, seeing what the problem is, seeing how you can manage this. I think diplomacy is very important in your career getting ahead because there'll be times when you won't agree with something that is being said or being done. That I think it's good to be diplomatic, to listen, to understand, and think, is there a middle course that you can take here rather than just your own way? Find a way to bring people together.
That's amazing. And also, a clear and focused approach to problem solving can be so helpful, no matter what life throws your way. And none of us are able to achieve success without some help along the way. Is there a particular person who you are grateful towards who helped get you to where you are?
Well, as a singer, of course,
Mm-hmm.
it's different from being in, whatever to technology or whatever career you've chosen. But as a singer, of course, I always think my very first singing teacher helped me a lot. And I mean, one of the pieces of advice she gave me is never attempt anything too difficult that you can't just achieve easily. It's better to take it, and this was with singing, an easy piece and sing it wonderfully well than a difficult piece and make a mess of it because nobody applauds you for doing something that you can't fulfill. All along my career, there were people, so you have a voice teacher who works with you in your voice, and then you have coaches. And a coach is like a coach, I guess, in a sport. Basically, you work with them, you sing, and they correct you, and then you work hard. I mean, okay, working hard is another aspect, obviously, of the career, but you're asking me about the people. So my first singing teacher and then my coach, my first singing teacher was a Dutch woman whose name was Katrina Hendrickson. And then my coach, Stuart Hamilton, both of them are deceased, but they were people you could lean on. They were important, and you could ask advice and achieve things, and they were honest. They were honest.
It's good to hear that about the impact that the person you have. Having a strong teacher can make a huge difference. Are you working on any exciting new projects right now?
Well, I guess, again, I'm not singing
Yes.
per se. I'm not performing on stages, although I do run an opera club here in this town. And the opera club is based around the high definition performances from the Metropolitan Opera that happen every month or every couple of months. And I take people to those operas, and they come first here, and I teach them about the opera. And I might even sing a few notes just to get things going. They may be notes from that opera or something by that composer. So those are exciting. And I work on those every month because even though I've done an opera, I have to review it. And I like to memorize what I'm going to say rather than, not word for word, but rather than read to them. I guess the most exciting project that I'm working on right now really is this one that I mentioned earlier, which is this clinic that is being set up at Princess Margaret Hospital for skin cancer. It's just exciting to be involved in something like that. I mean, we've done other philanthropic things, but that one is very exciting. And we are big supporters of the Stratford Festival in Ontario, and there's one particular director who I adore, and my husband adores, Donna Fior, who's brilliant. And so we've supported her musicals every year. So that's really fun. I mean, a lot of the things I'm doing now are more from the sidelines than from the performing, and I'm enjoying that very much.
That sounds fantastic. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "Women are like tea bags. We don't know our true strength until we are in hot water." In life, how are you in hot water, Riki? How are you brewing?
I don't think I quite understood what you just said.
It's like what has been the biggest challenge you've overcome in your career journey, and what did you learn from it?
The biggest challenge. Well, I'll tell you something. One of the biggest challenges was when I sang an operatic role that I adored. And I had been singing it all the time, but I had never done it on the stage. And I did it, and I took the advice of a director. It was a part of a young woman in Rigoletto, part of Gilda. And I took his advice because she's supposed to be 15. And so I sang it as if I were 15. Well, the reviews were pretty disastrous. And I wasn't singing really with my own voice. I was singing with the way that I thought would please him, right? Rather than what was correct. And that was one performance. And then I was interviewed by a few newspapers to say, well, what happened? And I said, this is what happened. So then I went back. So that was a challenge because you read things about yourself that you don't want to read. And I went back the next performance and I just did it. And it was fantastic. And it was covered as well, but it made me feel better. But it was a challenge. And even, as a performer, what I'm trying to say is getting bad reviews for your performance or getting criticism if you're in business. How do you face that? And you have to kind of pick yourself up and say, okay, let's just, either the critic is wrong or there's some kernel of truth in it or whatever. But it's a challenge and you really can't you can't stop just because things aren't going your way. And now, of course, and you have to kind of just pick yourself up and say, okay, how am I going to make this better? And that takes a lot of courage. It really does. In a very silly little way, I was playing in a fun golf tournament on the weekend. And it was a team thing. And my husband doesn't play golf. And so I was playing with men for the first time this year. And I guess I was nervous. Didn't think I was nervous, but I was nervous. It was a team of 4 of us. Well, I started out and I was so awful. It was as if I had never hit a golf ball. And so I had 3 holes where I lost 3 balls. And then I said, this is ridiculous. Get it together, girl. Just get it together. And then the next hole, I was terrific. And through the rest of it, I was a hero. And I even had a couple of wonderful holes. But it was so easy because I was I guess I was nervous that and it's just a golf tournament. It doesn't matter in the scheme of things. But I did shake myself and say, okay, that's not good, but let's fix it.
That's a beautiful perspective. Sounds like you, despite the challenges you faced, you found a way to not only survive but also thrive. What is the number one book you can sit and think, oh, I wish I read before I started my career?
Well, the number one book is, of course, my book. Well, it is in a way. I wish that, it's about my life. And I wish that I had been able to have read this book before I continued on in my life, because I would have learned a lot, lots of mistakes, lots of things like that. I love, we're talking about other books. I really love The Covenant of Water. I think that's a brilliant novel if no one has read that. But I think that's one of the finest books I've read recently.
That's a good choice, choosing your book. Let's imagine that you could meet anyone in the world for a private breakfast. Who would it be, and where would you choose to meet?
Well, I love Yannick Nézet-Séguin, who is, well, I don't know him personally, but I love his performance, his brilliance, his style. He has so much joy. And he's the music director of the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And I would love to meet him. He's a Canadian. He has an orchestra in Quebec. I've never had the chance. I sort of write on his Facebook page from time to time. I would love to meet him. I'd love to have breakfast with him. Where would I like to have breakfast? Probably in New York. I wouldn't eat a thing. I'd just be listening to him, or even in Quebec, in Montreal. That might be even more realistic. But I admire him. He's very young. I saw a video of him recently. I guess it was online. He was 10 years old, and he was conducting Ravel's Bolero, and he was doing with so much panache. And he's in inches. He's a small man, but his stature is enormous. I think he's just one of the most brilliant artists today in the world. And but he also has his joy, and he loves singers, and he's a great singers conductor, but he also conducts symphonic. He must have the most amazing brain, because many times he conducts operas without looking at the score. I mean, he would refer to it, but it must be memorized. So I love him. And he also, every once in a while, he changes the color of his hair, or I think he has tattoos, or he wears funky clothes. He fascinates me.
That sounds fascinating. For my last question, can you please give us your favorite life lesson quote?
Well, there were a couple. One of them was one I said at the very beginning of this, which is, there's always somebody worse off than you are. Do something. Go out and help them, and you'll soon forget how unhappy you are. The other one, I always like to think of myself a little bit like an orchid, very fragile and delicate, but very resilient. Orchids hang in there.
Beautiful, delicate yet resilient, just like the human spirit, right? Thank you so much, Riki, for answering my questions. And get back, Patrick, for our discussion. You are.
And I'm not sure who was muting me, whether it was me or somebody else. But anyway, I've unmuted myself now. Thank you very, very much, ladies. That was absolutely captivating altogether. Really, really interesting discussion. I must say, I am really feeling behind the times here, because I'm thinking back to Charles Dutoit, the Swiss conductor, as being the primary conductor in Montreal of the Montreal Symphony Orchestra. And I do believe it's Mr. Yannick Nézet-Séguin. He looks most fascinating character, and conducting the Metropolitan Opera in New York. I mean, that's quite a portfolio for starters.
Yannick doesn't conduct the Montreal Symphony. He conducts the Metropolitan Orchestra in Montreal. Uh-huh. He also has another orchestra. I think it's Detroit, but I'm not 100% sure. But he's the music director of the Metropolitan Opera, so he's pretty tops.
Yeah, that's quite incredible. To be the music director at the Metropolitan Opera is one of the most competitive positions in the world of conducting. And good grief, those New York orchestras, the New York audience know their stuff very, very well. That's really truly a tribute to his brilliance. So I'm gonna go and track down some of his recordings and try and make myself more au fait with his work. That sounds fantastic, because, gosh, well, earlier we had the delightful quotation from Mother Teresa that the most terrible poverty is loneliness and the feeling of being unloved, as Jamil was talking to us about. And Michel de Montaigne, he made a great remark. The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. And I do have to say, personally, I think that's a kind of core to how to know yourself, to manage to make yourself less lonely and so on. Thank you to everybody who's given us some love today. We really, really appreciate it. This is our last live show of the year, but we're going to have one more recording coming up. I'll talk to you about that in just a moment. But first of all, I want to say, Riki Turofsky, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Your work is transforming the world of so many people, and I think it's wonderful to hear you talking about the challenges of loneliness at all ages. And I have to say, I think you yourself managed to look, well, transformative through the ages with all of the things that you've achieved. It's quite incredible. We really, really feel inspired by what you've added to the community today. I'm so sorry Beata was not here to be able to talk to you. However, that's it from number 165 of the PhD live stream. Thanks to our guest, Riki Turofsky. To stay updated, don't forget, you can make sure you never miss a Positivity Hack delivered. Follow Women on It and turn on notifications to be alerted once a video has been released. This is the last live show of the year. Beata's going to be back next year live. Fortunately, we've got a last performance by Beata coming next week because she was able to record with Dr. Joan Ifland talking about feed your brain, boost your productivity. That is a beautiful recording, which is now going to be PhD number 166. And you can catch that next week, ladies and gentlemen. Same time, same place. So enjoy that. And after that, we will be back in the new year and look forward to bringing you lots more shows. And hopefully, all those shows are going to be brought to you by Beata. So, you've had enough of men talking, ladies and gentlemen. We don't need more mansplaining on PhD. Let me hand it back to Jamil for the last words.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you so much to our lovely audience. And for our production team today, Marian, Fernando, and Richel, thank you so much for joining us. As always, our positivity quote comes from positive thinking only and goes look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look a little harder. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude, as Maya Angelou says. Today is your day to hack the future, hack the positivity you want. Thank you.